Welcome to another episode of the Modern Life Podcast. I am Sam. I'll be your host today, and I am joined today by Tabby.
Hello.
And Stacy.
Hi.
Today we are talking about the movie / book Stardust. All right, before we start talking about Stardust, let's do some modern thoughts. What is on our mind today? Stacy, you wanna start? What's going on over there?
I just think it's funny that 2 articles were written about this. I guess there was a study done in Colorado State University about whether guys that like cats are less attractive to women.
What?
The fact that this study is even being done is amazing to me, but the fact that they had to sit there and like that women like view, I guess women view men that like cats less masculine, so they don't want to date them. And
it makes sense when you're saying it, but then when I think about it, it makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
So what the study say?
Study found that women find men, like if they saw a picture with a guy with cats, they're most likely going to swipe to not want to date him.
There's so many like calendars of the sexy firefighters with the cats. No?
I think it's like more with dogs. No, it's for some reason they like don't view the guy with cat like, and even though it's like a small percentage that it goes down, it's only like 6% that the women that won't date him, the women that absolutely refuse went up to like 10%. So for some reason, like there's a strong passion.
Wait, did the study go further, like examining why cats? Like
they say that it has to do with the fact that for some reason in the United States, it's a masculinity thing. Like they want to be with somebody who's more masculine because they want to feel more protected, things like that. And a guy holding a cat for some reason is not as masculine, I guess you could say.
Interesting.
Well, ladies, cats do form like more tighter, close bonds than dogs do. Dogs will just immediately kind of love you. So if you want a guy who's emotionally mature, maybe you should look out for the cat lovers.
I will say that I found myself a strapping cat guy.
Hey there. I like both.
Yeah, but you were way more of a cat guy until you met Bella. And that's my dog.
Because your dog's the best.
Yes,
and
agreed.
It is my dog now.
Yes, it's our dog.
She loves me more.
No. You just feed her in the morning.
All right, so my modern thought is I'm going into video game territory here, specifically into the Spider-Man universe. They recently announced that they're going to make a standalone game with Miles Morales, which, if you don't know, is basically like African-American Spider-Man. And when I saw that, it just filled me with joy because I'm so over just every new Spider-Man thing that comes out. It's always like Peter Parker, and he's always the same age, and he never has his shit together. It's just always the same version of Spider-Man, and especially if you watched the Into the Spider-Verse movie, it really kind of opened my eyes of like where else that can go. There's so many different kind of avenues you can take with Spider-Man, and so when they're finally announced that they're making this standalone version with Miles Morales, who's just seems to be a better human being than any Peter Parker person I've ever seen. Like he's just smarter, and you know, he seems to have his stuff together, and it's not always wearing like 3-day-old clothes with pizza hanging on the ceiling like Peter Parker. It's just nice that we're finally like exploring some other versions of Spider-Man. It's going to be about a 10-hour long game, and it's basically what Uncharted 4 did with, what was it called? Lost Legacy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically going to be like that, where it's the standalone thing, but it's not as long as the original game, but it's kind of in that same universe. So, and honestly, like 10 hours is it's like a solid gameplay experience. So I think it's just cool. So yeah.
Right on. We might play that.
Yeah, I might.
Alrighty, so mine, I'm kind of trying to get back to normal at work. And a lot of the people I haven't seen in 2 months now, like some of the front of house staff, and I'm kind of checking in with them the other day, and I'm talking to one of them, and I'm like, oh, how have you been doing? How's your girlfriend? Was she out of work? And he goes, oh, no, she's been working from home. It's like crunch time for her right now. And I'm like, crunch time for what? And he goes, she works on the Mars 2020 project. That was my reaction too. So Mars 2020 it's like a Mars rover expedition that was started in 2012.
Wow.
And the month this episode is coming out, July, is when the launch date is to send this robot up there.
Is this a NASA thing or is this like a SpaceX thing? Do we know?
I think it's a NASA thing because that's where I got a lot of the information.
Okay.
But this robot is going to be collecting samples of certain areas on Mars where they think there might have been like past evidence of life. So it's trying to get all these like Earth samples and collect the dust, and then there's going to be another mission of another robot trying to get those samples back. The project costs about $2.1 billion, which I think is quite reasonable for going to Mars. So. Yeah, I just thought that was really fascinating and really cool.
But how is this different from... Because they've already sent like a couple rovers up there, right? Do we know how this is any different? It's just trying to collect different stuff or what?
So from what I was seeing, it is more to do with... There's something about studying the dust and how it affects the environment, and then also just trying to find these signs of life. And so it's going to a specific region on Mars where they think there might have been the highest chance of there being like not organisms now, but past evidence of them. So it's going to launch in July, and then it's going to land in February, which I, again, think is quite fast to reach Mars. Yeah. It's only a few months, but...
why are you into space all of a sudden? You used to hate space stuff.
I still don't care about space stuff.
Every time I bring up space, you're like, how does that help us down here?
I still don't know how it does.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud
But
of you.
I just thought it was really cool that my coworker's girlfriend is working on this, and I guess she's been working on it for... the past 6 years.
It's crazy when you dive into these giant space projects, and you don't think about this, how literally down to the tiniest screw, everything has to be completely, has to be looked at and just engineered and made at the highest level possible, because just, one tiny part fails and there goes your whole spacecraft.
Yeah, and the launch date, I guess, is also really important. I guess they always are, but again, I don't know anything about this, but it's just the way that the planets align that it has to be in July.
All right.
Yes, from space into Stardust.
Woo! What is up with the woo today?
I'm like surfing the Stardust waves. Do you have a movie summary over there? I know you do. Come on.
Let's do it. All right. So the movie Stardust came out in 2007. It was directed by Matthew Vaughn. And I think this is the second Matthew Vaughn movie we're doing, because we did X-Men before.
We did X-Men, yeah.
And this is also a book, which came out in 1997 and was written by Neil Gaiman. So it's a story about a boy living in Victorian England in a town called Wall, which borders a magical kingdom. Tristan has lived alone with his father, who finally reveals to him that his mother, whom he has never met, is enslaved to a witch in this fairy kingdom. Tristan sets off to find his mom, but immediately abandons his important quest to capture a fallen star in the form of a young girl called Yvain, and offer her as a present to the prettiest girl in his village. Yvain has been knocked out of the sky by a gemstone sent to the heavens by the fairy kingdom's dying ruler. His heirs begin a competitive search for this jewel, as its possession promises ascension to the throne. Yvain is also pursued by 3 aging witches, who plan to devour her to gain youth and prolonged life. On their dangerous journey back to Wall, Tristan and Yvain also encounter quite a few colorful characters, some helpful, some less so. By the end of the movie, Tristan reunites with his mother, discovers he's the last remaining heir to the throne, and falls in love with Yvain. The film manages to beautifully tie together its many narrative threads and also combine a multitude of genres in one, including fantasy, action, adventure, romance, mystery, and comedy.
So you're the only person that read the book, Tabby, and I only watched this movie for the first time, when we watched it, like a month ago or so. Mm-hmm. And I think both you and Stacy had seen this movie already several times before, right?
Yeah.
So this was just my introduction to it, and one of the first things I noticed was how was very much in that spirit of Princess Bride, where you can't just put like one label on it. It's it's a little kid friendly and has adult humor. It's fantasy. There's some action, like comedy. Like there's all these different genres kind of mixed in there, which is I don't know if I've seen a movie pull it off as well like Stardust since Princess Bride. I think it's really hard to mix all these things together.
Agreed.
Well, and I think now that I'm thinking of it, we spoke so much about the ensemble cast of Stardust, and that's really one of the strengths of the Princess Bride too. So many characters, from Billy Crystal to Christopher Guest, like all these characters are just so fantastic, and that's what's really great about Stardust too, where you just have Ricky Gervais popping up, and you have Mark Strong.
Yeah, the cast is like for even the small roles is just like kind of incredible.
Yeah,
it didn't have a huge budget, right?
No, it had like 80, 90 million. It was like a fairly big movie.
I think it was 72 million.
Oh, just a few million. It's still a big budget. So if we're just doing a quick comparison between Princess Bride and Stardust, I would almost say that Stardust, the supporting cast, is even more important than the supporting cast in Princess Bride, because unlike Princess Bride, I really don't quite care for the main characters in Stardust.
Yeah.
Like, to me, they're honestly the weakest part of the movie, and the reason why the movie works is because of this insane supporting cast that are constantly, thrown onto the screen. How do you guys feel about the main characters?
Yeah, I agree. The Princess Bride, I mean, that's like an amazing love story.
Yeah.
We love those two characters.
Like Robin Wright and the other guy.
Yeah.
I never remember his name. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Tristan and Yvain and how we're maybe not that keen on them.
Claire Danes just does not do it for me.
Yeah, you don't like her.
But it's not just in this movie, like, because, everyone loves that Homeland show, and I haven't really had a lot of exposure to Claire Danes. So I'm like, because I think she's just overacting so hard in this movie. And I'm like, is this just for this movie, or is this just how she acts? And I looked up some scenes from Homeland, because I'd never seen it, and it's just her with an American accent doing the same thing. I feel it was just there's nothing subtle about her acting, which just doesn't work for me. It's just always a lot like going on in the face. And
I think it was just that scene where she's talking to the mouse, and it's like that confession of love, and just so many things happening with her facial muscles.
It's just a lot with the mouth and the eyes and the eyebrows.
You're doing it, but it's a podcast, so no one can see it.
And yeah, we don't know why she's doing a British accent, right?
No, because everybody else is kind of just doing their own accent and their own thing, but she's doing something else.
I tried to look up why the British accent. All I could find is an interview of her talking about how she had a dialect coach and all this.
Well, wait, Charlie Cox, is he American? I don't know.
I know that it was like a lot of British actors were cast in this, according to the article that I read about it, and so I think they just went with it.
I know Cox is a pretty British last name. Let's look it up. Yeah, no, so Charlie Cox is an English actor.
Oh, okay,
so he's I guess most well known for that Daredevil show that was on Netflix, and in that he's doing an American accent. So
I see.
I guess the only person not speaking their native accent is Claire Danes in this movie, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like Robert De Niro is just doing his Robert De Niro voice.
Yeah, Henry Cavill's doing his
Did
own.
she use a British voice, or did she use...
No, I think she's just using her own.
I don't remember.
Who, Michelle Pfeiffer?
Yeah.
Michelle Pfeiffer?
Yeah, I think she's just being normal. So I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's this royal star falling from the skies. Like I don't know why. It just seems unnecessary. I don't know. And Charlie Cox, I'm sure, is a lovely guy. It's just not.
He just doesn't have that leading man.
The it factor.
Yeah. I actually disagree with that. I think it's just the characters themselves that really annoy me.
Just the writing of the character. Okay, I can see that.
Because he's going on this mission to find his mom, and then he's like, "F mom, I don't care about finding mom."
Well, I know, but that's in the book. That's not in the. He is.
No.
Yeah.
In the book, he doesn't even know about his mom.
Okay.
So there's no discussion with the dad of you have to go find your mom, which is actually also something that doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of the world building that the candle would transport him even though he's in England, because the magic isn't supposed to work, and we find this out later that Claire Danes would just turn into rock when she crosses the wall.
Yeah.
So that it's like fun, but it's one of those things that's not very consistent.
I guess you're right. I really didn't care for just how his character was written, and maybe I'm just projecting that onto Charlie, and it's not fair for Charlie, and I'm sorry about that.
And even his moment of when he kind of finally realizes that Victoria is maybe not the right person for him. He's like holding her in his arms, and then he drops her onto the floor, and he's like, why don't you grow up? And it's like, you just grew up 5 minutes ago. How about you show a little compassion?
One of the reviews that I read said that the Victoria was so much better of a character in the book versus in the movie. They kind of like one-dimensional her. Did you find that to be true?
She's just very different in the book. So in the book, that character is also not likable because he's like following her home and asking her 5 times like if he can kiss her, and then they see this falling star, and he's like, what if I got that for you? And she's like, okay, why don't you go do that? She's like trying to get home safely and not be attacked by this, like, and she's already engaged to another person in the village at that point. And when he comes back, there's like more of a time lapse, and I think she's actually already pregnant by the time that he comes back.
Well, let's talk about him coming back, because I don't know how it is in the book. In the movie, it just seems like this forced thing to move the plot forward, where he just runs off without telling Claire Danes where he's going, right?
Yeah, Stacy didn't like that misunderstanding.
Oh no, he abandoned me. It's like, why don't you just tell her like what you're like?
The whole thing just didn't flow.
Why wouldn't you be like, hey, I got to go back into town and take care of one more thing. I'll be back in an hour. Yeah. Like, why does he have to sneak off?
So I think you guys are correct about that, but I like how it forces the story together at the end, because then the mom, like, she kind of kidnaps the witch and like runs over there. Right. Mark Strong's coming, Michelle Pfeiffer's coming, and then you have Charlie Cox running back, and they're all coming together to the star. And the culmination of that, I thought, added a lot of movement and action and was really cool, but the way that was initiated is one of those movie misunderstanding things that's just like, why is this happening? Yeah.
Like, really?
I just feel like there could have been like a dramatic reason for him to leave that they could have thrown in there. Like something to like make it more of a rush where he didn't have time to tell her he was leaving.
Right.
Rather than just this like romantic gesture that fell so short.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting.
And also Victoria in that scene where they have the picnic. The midnight picnic.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, Henry Cavill's gonna go get me a diamond ring from the village over. And it's like, okay, if you're living in like some Victorian little village and a guy says he's gonna get you a diamond ring, go with that guy. Like, oh my God. Like, let's stop shaming her for wanting to be with Henry Cavill.
Yeah, seriously.
No kidding. Also, Charlie Cox's character has gone on, he's on his first date, and he's like, I love you and I want to marry you. And I guess maybe that's just what happened back then, but it's so silly. Like, you don't even know this person.
Yeah, he's like super extra. Which all those lines are actually from the book. I think they're quite pretty when he's like, I'm going to get you a polar bear and a tiger, and I'm going to get you the gold from the what, I don't know what it all was, but...
You want to talk about Michelle Pfeiffer?
I thought she was brilliant.
You want to talk about her poor horse?
Wait, horse?
Oh, no, wait, that's the other witch. I'm mixing up witches.
Are you talking about the goat? Is that what you're trying to
Yeah, we had some animal rights.
Too many witches. Where's the other witch who has this giant cart?
Salwater ditch.
She has this one poor little, it's not even that big of a horse.
Yeah, that poor horse.
She's dragging this cart.
This giant cart. And then at the end, it's like at full gallop. It's like, oh, this poor horse.
Poor little thing.
Michelle Pfeiffer has these golden strands in her hair that teenagers used to do back in my day, where they used to put them in their hair, and like for some reason she pulls it off and she looks like amazing and like a goddess.
It's Michelle Pfeiffer. She always looks amazing. Even as an old wench, she still looks amazing.
Yeah, it's some really cool makeup things happening.
They did such a good job with the aging and like everything.
That's true.
Yeah,
just the aging from start to finish and going back and forth, like phenomenal.
Speaking of, Michelle Pfeiffer used to be a model, right? Or was she just always an actress?
I think she was always an actress. I don't think she was ever a model. Yeah. She has it's beautiful, and I don't know if it would work as a model. She's got like one eye that's a little bit.
Oh, that's right.
Like-
She's got the Ryan Gosling.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
and I don't know if that
notice
would
that.
work as a model, but she's gorgeous.
All the three witches, like, it was fun to spend time with them, where they're just like this sister dynamic of like they're competing with each other, but they're all supporting each other at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know,
It was fun. In the book, that she doesn't play as big a role, right? Like,
Oh, really?
Well, in the book at the end, she doesn't die. There's kind of actually like a sweet moment between Yvain and her. Once the witch finally finds her, Yvain has already given her heart to Tristan. So even killing her wouldn't give the witch her heart. So it's like, well, you got away, and then they kind of have like a sweet moment, and that's it.
Does she have sisters in the book?
Oh, I
they
can't
die?
remember now. I think she does. Can't remember. I just read this book.
Man,
I'm
you
sorry.
suck. Wow.
Sorry. I actually wanted to point out something in the book. I have a few quotes written down because I think Neil Gaiman's writing is quite beautiful. There's a reason he's still a very popular, writer, and most of his books get made into movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he said when he first saw the pirate ship, he was so amazed because he's like, well, I can just write it down on the page, but you have to like build the whole thing, and you could like walk on the
Right.
deck. And
Right.
like a reviewer online said that the movie didn't match up at all with how imaginative the book was. And I just need to push back against that because I think the movie did such a great job. The CGI still holds up. You just have this one little like shot of Ricky Gervais's door and then inside his hut, and it's just a set, but it somehow felt like his house could be part of this like winding seaport town that they like. I feel like it does.
I think I read probably the same article.
Do
as
you agree with it? Or?
No, I disagree. I think
Yeah.
that I've read, I read a lot of fantasy books, so I know that the translation between a book and a movie, usually sometimes they try and match it up so much that when you go back to watch the movie, like an older movie, the CGI never holds up. And I felt like this movie, they did such a good job of like putting in just enough, but not overdoing it. They leave some things to the imagination. You know what I mean? Like they plant things that are magical, but don't overdo it and like have to go and show it. And like, I feel like that's such an error in a lot of fantasy movies that they completely destroy the moment by trying to recreate these things that your imagination, you're never going to match your imagination.
Right.
They do it in horror movies too, where they just like sometimes not showing it is better for the movie than to show it. Does that make sense? And so I completely disagree with this woman. I think she was very off, but that's just my opinion.
Well, again, not to like compare it too much to Princess Bride, but that's really the only thing I can compare it to, because there's nothing. It's not like I don't think there's a whole lot of similar things that have so many different genres packed in. But just talking about the movie, like the Princess Bride, when you watch that, that fight scene's on a set and like that thing's made out of rubber, but it still holds up because just the way the effects are done, it's all very like charming. Does that make sense?
Well, it's the humor too.
Right,
They
but I'm
both-
saying that like Stardust has that same kind of thing going for it, where I'm like, okay, I know I'm on this. When he first comes into the enchanted world after he skips the wall, right? Well, the dad in the beginning of the movie, and you're like, you immediately are just like, oh yeah, this is just, you can just tell it's just a really big set, but it doesn't take me out of the movie in this instance. It's just kind of the way everything's done is just very charming. So if you don't have too much, because like fantasy movies love to do that, where it's just everything is just way over CGI'd. And I just don't think you always need
so I'm
that
saying,
with the
like,
genre. It just needs to be kind of charming and cute, and that works really well sometimes with the fantasy genre.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like some people expect too much, and you got to realize that in a novel, when you're reading it, the things that the writer can make you see things, but it's always from your own perception. So you're never going to be able to recreate that in reality, because your mind is always going to go to the extreme when it's reading. You know what I mean? It always it elaborates the scene so much. And I hate when people do that. Like when they take a book and they're like, oh, I wanted it to have more of this and more. It's like, well, that's how you saw it. I saw it completely different when I read the book.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think there's that imagery that people need to remember when they're recreating. And I like how they kind of played it back a little bit. So
Absolutely. And just a quote I was going to say about Gaiman's writing, where he really puts you into a moment. This is from describing I think this is the dad or Tristan picking up the flower. You know how the witches have these crystal flowers for sale, and then Tristan gets one of them as like a protective charm. And he writes, each flower was made of glass or crystal, and they chimed and jingled like distant glass bells. And then once you pick it up, it's like a noise similar to that produced by wetting a finger and rubbing it gently around a wine glass. And the way he describes it, it's like you can hear it in your head, like as you're reading it.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
Yeah, I don't know. I just really love that. And I think what contributes to it looking so good is what you said is the sets. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, Ricky Gervais's head with the things hanging down, and that yellow card looks so cool, the little witch's card, and even just the props, like those glass daggers that the witches have, they look so cool. And then when they, when they shatter, and
I don't know what it is about the fantasy genre. For some reason, you can get away with not everything looking, oh, this is like the greatest CGI I've ever seen, or like you can rewatch David Bowie's Labyrinth, and it just with the fantasy genre, I don't know. I haven't thought about this too much. Well, it's supposed to look
whimsical, and it doesn't need to look real. It's not supposed to be real.
There's a lot more kind of wiggle room. You can just get away with a lot more the way the movie looks, and it'll still be cute and hold up 20 years from now, whereas if you do the latest CGI technology, like that might not look good 20 years from now.
It most likely won't look good 20 years from now.
Yeah. And I think actually also the costume design contributes a lot to this, because everything really looks like it fit the actors and it went with their personality.
Except for the opening scene dress.
Except for Yvain's dress is actually both of them, but like Mark Strong has this like, black outfit, and then Charlie Cox has that jacket later on with the brown collar.
Yeah, that's an amazing jacket.
And
what's your favorite outfit? I know you have one. You're always about
the bathrobe.
the movie costumes.
Honey, you're wearing a bathrobe. Well, and I think actually something that I could compare it to that's more high budget, now that we're talking about maybe movies not within the genre, but I'm thinking of the King Arthur movie by Guy Ritchie, which has a lot of CGI and it looks really good, but it has that incredible set designer who also worked on Game of Thrones. And that show had incredible props, incredible sets. And then the costume design as well does a lot of like color coding and like communicating character through costume. And I think Stardust does that so well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if you have these tiny details down, you can get away with maybe the CGI not being super perfect. Yeah, Yvain's dresses, both of them. The first one is just this shapeless, like gray.
One, right?
No, it's this gray, like
no, it's silver
satin.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
It's like
silver.
it's silver. It's supposed to be like starlight, but I don't.
Oh, it looks so bad.
It was just really plain, and it was just it wasn't like everything in the movie was just so like whimsical and like this play between modern, like
that's true,
and then there's this dress that was just completely modern,
and it doesn't fit her body.
No, it's like it looks horrible on her, and it just like the style was just not. It didn't fit with the rest of the movie. I could have pictured so many better.
I wrote that
dresses
same thing down. Yeah.
It looks
like
in my head, I could see the dress she should have been wearing, and like that was not it.
The silver dress looks like something a pop star would have worn to the Grammys like in 1996.
Yeah.
Like, this looks very futuristic. It's all like smooth silver.
Because when you think of like what a star would wear, I'm picturing like the Queen of the Night from the Magic Flute, and the opera singers always wear these like elaborate, cool, sparkly
kind of flair.
But then even the dress she wears later on has this really long train. You're telling me Robert De Niro would set her off on like a hiking journey in this like dress with a really long train? No, he would not. She should have worn like pants, or I just feel bad for Claire Danes. She doesn't wear a single good costume in this
Claire
movie.
Well, let's talk about Robert De Niro since you brought him up.
Oh, he's amazing.
To me, it's my favorite character it's either Robert De Niro or Mark Strong. I'm kind of
not Ricky Gervais.
Ricky Gervais is great, and he's funny as always. But maybe I'm leaning towards Mark Strong. But it's just so refreshing to see Robert De Niro in this, because it's just
Is that a character?
I don't know what other movie he plays somebody like this.
And he just has a good time.
Right.
Yeah.
Just has a really good time. And I'm like, I've never seen this version of Robert De Niro. Like, who is this guy?
Yeah, it was definitely fun.
He's not being a hard ass, and he's not being, like dirty grandpa. You probably don't remember that movie. Like just doing like some stupid comedic role. Like it's genuinely, it seems like he's into it, and he's like fun-loving De Niro. I'm like, oh, I didn't know this guy existed. He's always this curmudgeon every time you see him in interviews.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, great character. Shakespeare. Yeah.
So he's fun, and then Mark Strong.
Yeah, let's talk about Mark Strong.
Oh man, I know. I love Mark Strong in general, but he is just. I mean, and just the brothers in general in this movie.
Oh yeah,
just,
the Greek
they're
chorus.
probably my favorite part of the movie.
They're
they're
the best part. I love all the little effects they did with them, with Rupert when he's like falling, and so his hair is always to one side now, and
like the way you die. That's just the way you look in the afterlife.
It's just so much fun. Yeah. When they're like, she's got the necklace, they're just like commenting on everything.
Who were you talking to that thought it was like too mean that Mark Strong pushes his brother off the ledge? Would you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think some people thought it was too violent. I'm like, that's the funniest part when he's just
because the whole family is just like evil.
Yeah,
like
except for the sister. Starting
with the dad, yeah, except for the sister. I mean, the king is just like, I'm about to die, and haha, none of you get, you have to compete for who's the king. Yeah,
Mark Strong, he has this really funny description in the book too, where it goes, Septimus wore black doublet and hose, a black hat with a black feather in it, and looked for all the world like a foppish assassin from a minor Elizabethan historical play. And they made him look a lot cooler in the movie, but I just thought that was such a funny description of like, who this guy is.
Right. And I loved, so there's a fight scene at the end of the movie with Mark Strong where the
voodoo fight scene.
Michelle Pfeiffer's witch is controlling his dead body, and the way I couldn't find anything as far as special features or descriptions of how exactly they did that. My best guess is it's like a stuntman on a wire.
Yeah.
So they're supported, but they can or a contortionist for that matter. So they can, like the way the body is bending like backwards, you would almost have to be a contortionist.
Yeah, we don't think Mark Strong did all that.
No, I don't think so. I started just giggling during that fight scene because to me it's like a really good sword fight scene, but it's also really comedic, like how Mark Strong's body's moving, like these really like abrupt movements. I don't know how to explain it on audio format here. You just kind of have
puppet.
Yeah, like you have to watch it if you haven't seen it on YouTube. It's really funny the way it's done.
And even the effect of him dying when he's kind of floating up, as if he's in the water and he's drowning. Yeah. Very cool.
Oh, Mark. He's wearing a really good wig in this movie.
Yeah, he looks good.
But then when, again, all the brothers are sitting there as ghosts, they're all dead at this point, and Mark Strong's body comes back to life, and it shows the brothers, and they're all looking at him, and he's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm not doing this. I don't know. He doesn't know what's going on. It's just so funny. And then, his body gets stabbed, and all the brothers are like, ooh. This is great.
Another side character I really loved was the guard of the wall. Because in the book, it's different community members every night who have to guard the wall, and just having this older guy there.
Oh, the fight scene.
Yeah, so in the beginning of the movie, the dad tricks him, right, pretending like he's gonna walk away, and then turns around and just books it through the opening in the wall.
Yeah.
And then later on, his son, Charlie Cox, tries to do the same thing, and this time the guard is just ready for it. And he's like this 90-year-old guy. And just,
he's like John Wick.
Yeah, 90-year-old John Wick. So, I don't know if this is explained in the book. Is there some magic barrier that the wall has where you can't just jump over the wall? You have to go through this opening?
No, in the book, the wall is really high.
Okay.
I just don't think they had the budget. They're there's this little brick wall we have.
It's literally a foot high.
Yeah.
Well, they use they filmed in a city in Iceland or something, or an
And that's probably just a little
just
thing.
like they
there.
used like real. Some of it wasn't set design. Like the town they're walking through is an actual town.
Right. It looks nice.
Yeah, and so they didn't really have to do much to change anything. They just had to like throw in a couple things. So it's actually it's not really a set on a lot of the scenes, which I thought was really
never
cool.
explained in the movie. I'm just like, why just go like 100 yards east and then just jump over the wall where there's no guard?
Oh no, it's powers, you can't do that.
So in my head, I'm just like, it's a magic wall. You have to go through the open.
I want to talk about one effect that never works for me, even in video games, even in everything, and it's the neon green fire. As soon as you make something neon green, I'm out. Like
it just always looks fake.
Always looks so cheap and like.
Interesting.
I know I love Dragon Age Inquisition, but all my powers are like neon green, and I could never get used to it. Not my favorite color. It's just a glow stick. Like I don't know, it just looks so fake, and nobody else had this experience.
No, I don't have this problem.
You're digging the green fire.
I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, it does always look incredibly fake. I don't know if that's just us humans going like, we've had fire for thousands of years, and this is not what it looks like. It's like this primary part of our brain being like, that's not real fire. It's green.
All right.
That's the best explanation I got for you.
This movie also has a great montage. All good movies do. And it's the scene on the ship when they're learning how to dance and learning how to fight and everybody's having a good time.
Didn't I? I was like, waiting for the montage.
Waiting for the montage. Here it
goes. There's always a montage.
And this was a good one.
Yeah.
You can just tell, like, okay, they're getting new clothes. They're going to have to learn how to fight. This is ripe for a montage right here. Anytime anyone has to learn how to like fight or shoot, you gotta do it in a montage.
Yeah.
Because in real life, it would take like years to learn this stuff.
Took a week.
Yeah.
Well, it's supposed to occur in months in the book,
in
right?
the book, yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's like, but in the movie, they make it seem like a week.
The ship is only like a really tiny part, so I think it's actually really smart that they put Deniro in there and they made it this whole thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really love that sequence.
It's funny that Deniro is on... So he's on the movie poster, which I find...
And you kept going, where's Deniro?
It's like halfway through the movie, like, is Deniro in this movie or not? Obviously, he got paid a lot for this little cameo. Otherwise, I don't know if he would be on the poster.
Yeah, the way they expanded the ship of, like, showing the lightning rods and them flying around. And
harvesting the lightning.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
This movie's also a contender for the movie crime of no hat and hair down, which all peer dramas do. Because Victoria is supposed to be this, like, sexy teenager. She's 17. All the boys in the village love her. And she's walking into the shop and skipping the line. And she's wearing her hair down without a hat on, which always means that you're a little kid. I know it doesn't mean that nowadays, but back in the day, if you had your hair down, it meant you're, like...
I love that what drives you crazy in that scene. To me, it was like, oh my God, wait, what? She's skipping the line, and there's all these older... people in the shop. I just feel like...
And they don't say anything.
I feel like back then, especially back then, like you kind of... Don't you have to just kind of respect your elders?
Yeah.
Right? Like
well,
they would
in
have
the book, she was just so sweet and charming that people didn't care and they would...
Not in the movie.
Not in the movie, no. She's a bit of a brat.
She's like cutting the line at Starbucks going, I have a meeting in 10 minutes in my Frappuccino. Everyone's just
she orders
there.
a blended drink, the one that takes the longest.
Everyone's just standing there. I would like someone would have just slapped her like back outside. Just don't disrespect your elders like that back then. That might fly in 2020, but not back then. And then Charlie Cox's character.
And then he just leaves.
He's like, oh my God.
At least he gets fired though.
Right away.
Yeah, there's some repercussion for it.
Whatever you want. Oh my God, you're so pretty.
He's so pathetic.
Sorry, I really don't like him. He's so weak.
You think he's gonna be a good ruler?
No,
in the end?
he's such like a beta in the worst sense.
Yeah.
He's just so, ugh.
I don't even dislike him that
Man.
much. I just think he's got a lot of growing up to do, a lot of learning to do.
This guy's gonna be king? Like, Jesus. God help the kingdom.
My next note in here is about transitions. This movie has absolutely phenomenal transitions, and it's part of what makes all of the different storylines tie in together. Because you'll have, like, Michelle Pfeiffer throwing up runes, but then Mark is the one who's catching them.
Right.
The star is falling, but then it pans down to Tristan having that midnight picnic.
Oh, right.
And the transitions and editing are so brilliant in between every scene that it's like, it's not like a sudden cut of like, oh my god, we just spent an hour with like Samwise and Frodo, and now I have to adjust myself to like, no, now we're back with like Legolas and Gimli, and it's
Right,
like,
sure.
it's more like seamless, I feel, and
Yeah, I didn't even think about it like that. That's a good point.
There wasn't any areas where you were like, sometimes in movies you're like, oh, that could be cut, or that could be cut. Like, that's not necessary. It was very fluid in the fact that you never really felt bored, but they were
not a lot of
talking about a lot of different people and a lot of different situations, but they were able to like make it fluid throughout.
Which again, you have Matthew Vaughn is only his second movie ever. He's got a fairly big budget with all these stars. Kind of, like, not bad for your sophomore directing effort.
I wanted to talk about the ending in the book. Because in the book, he ends up at this market again, and then his mom is finally freed, and she introduces herself, and there's not a lot of emotional payoff. It's like they just kind of get, in the book, they just kind of get together, and then the mom's like, hey, I'm your mom, and you're the last remaining ruler to the kingdom, and we should go back home to the palace. And there's not whole romance between the mom and the dad in the book either. And then Tristan's like, no, I'm just going to go backpacking for like 3 years and find myself. And why don't you go home instead and rule the kingdom? It's like, your mom has been through so much. And like, this is like worst son ever. He like finally comes back and like rules the kingdom. But I just thought it was so sweet in the movie how she's like, I'm your mom. And then they like hug, and then they're there for each other, and like, oh, I finally found my mom, even though I wasn't really looking because I sucked. But
yeah,
I have a question though. In the book, doesn't he have like a stepmom? Like, isn't his dad married?
Yeah, so he finally
and
finds
he has a sister, right?
Yeah, he finds out that his mom isn't his actual mom. That he has these magic. He was always kind of different. And then he finds out he's like half from the fairy kingdom.
When his dad in the movie like gives him the candle and gives him the whole backstory, and the main character is just like, oh wow, okay, like he's been basically lied to about like the story of what his mom, like, what does his dad tell him? Like,
well,
his
he
mom
probably
died
just doesn't tell him
right?
anything. I don't know.
If I was a maker, I'd be like, oh, holy crap, like what?
I don't know. They have a little moment there in the attic. The book is also written like as if it's like an older fairy tale. So it's very imaginative. It has all that beautiful writing, but there's not these big, like, emotional, like, character moments as it, like, if you're reading, like, a book from the romance genre or something like that, it's just like, oh, and they lived happily ever after.
Okay.
So he deliberately writes the book like that, but I think for a movie, it pays off when you have those more emotional scenes in there of, like, characters getting together or, falling in love. And I have one last thing to say about this.
Let's do it.
The fantasy genre is always really guilty of this, and there's really no excuse, but I think this could have easily been a more diverse movie, especially because you have this magical fairy kingdom, and you have like one black guy on the ship there, and there's no reason for it. I don't know.
Something about the fantasy genre, it's always, and especially when it's like a lot of British accents, it's always just a bunch of white people with British accents, no?
Well, I think where it comes from is Tolkien being this father of fantasy, but he has this huge historical background. So he based his whole Middle-earth and that story about these rules of how to be a knight and the idea of like knightly love. So the knights do all the action and the women are at home. And I think we got a lot of lack of diversity from that. And still, it's also a very male-dominated genre where a lot of old school gender conventions still exist. And I think modern writers are really pushing back against that now. And I think while Tolkien maybe did a good job of bringing the story to life based on all his historical knowledge, you have these nerds then taking that and not having that knowledge and then going, oh, my world is also going to be sexist and my world is also going to be white because that's what I've been reading. I grew up with Tolkien. But they don't have like a critical thought of like, why is that my default? If that
Right.
makes sense. They don't
Yeah.
spend the time to like explore that.
It's like,
and
this is what the genre is.
when it's like it really shouldn't be. It was just one guy doing.
What's so weird,
that
especially
thing.
if you think of the word fantasy, like fantasy
Yeah.
genre, it seems
Right.
like you should just be able to do whatever the hell you want. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you have this genre where there's witches and trolls and dragons, but we can't have like a black guy who's a knight.
Right.
Like somehow that's out of our realm
Right.
of imagination. It's so strange.
yeah.
Like more than any other genre, you should just be able to. It should just be so easy to have it be more diverse.
This movie came out in 2007. Are we looking at it from a 2020 point of view, or did all the movies that, I mean, I'm not saying the diversity. I'm saying, was diversity
I don't know that we're
lacking?
knocking this movie specifically. Just the genre as a
No,
whole.
no. I
think,
agree with
right?
you. I'm not disagreeing with any of your points. I'm just asking from a point of view from this movie. In 2007, were movies as diversified as they are? Because we are looking at it from a standpoint right now where we have this expectation that movies need to start diversifying more, and there needs to be more of this. Are we like it?
Well, that
was
was
it applicable in
that was-
2007? That's all I'm asking.
That was only 13 years ago. You would have thought that.
But
And there's so many activists and so many things that happen around that issue, and Hollywood just kind of shuts his eyes to that, and they still do that nowadays. So
When you look at the most recent giant fantasy thing was Game of Thrones. That's not exactly, but you know, it's just the genre as a whole. It seems to be.
and
I think Hollywood
stuff.
as a whole
Yeah.
seems to be, because it's still got a lot of these old school white, like that's the money, that's where the backers are, you know, and I think that they're starting to realize that they need to start diversifying, but it's not just fantasy. It's an area where they should be able to diversify faster because it's
Right,
in your
that's what I'm
imagination,
saying.
but it's the entire Hollywoodized movies are just,
Yeah.
they're lacking. They should be
Right.
pushing us forward, and a lot of them aren't.
Yeah, and I think we've become so vocal with the internet now where we're like, we're not going to stand for this anymore. Like, we're so tired of it. And I don't think Matthew Vaughn is sitting down with his casting director like, I only want white people. I think he just is not thinking about it.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so I'm not,
No,
there's no excuse, but it's, yeah.
It's just you know, more awareness, and obviously there's a big push for that right now. So, fun fact though, Matthew Vaughn, I didn't know this when I was researching. Did you know he's married to
Claudia Schiffer?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, she was supposed to be a Vane, but she was pregnant.
Ah,
Yeah.
So Claudia Schiffer, if you don't know, is basically the biggest German supermodel after like Heidi Klum. I had no idea he's married to her. I'm like, oh. I had a good time watching. I had a way better time watching it than I thought I was going to. Actually.
Yeah, you don't like period fan.
I kind of I wasn't even planning on doing this podcast, and you guys were watching the movie. Like, where did you want? Come watch it with us. Come on. I was like, okay, I got nothing else to do. And I'm like, oh, it's a good time. It was fun.
Fun.
I just want to say that this was my first Gaiman novel. I only read it because I joined this wonderful, wonderful book club online. And it's a pretty short book. If you enjoy this movie, I think it's worth checking it out. I think originally it was like a comic book too, if that's more accessible, which I have not read that version. But
That was what I almost got, because I was going to read this book for this podcast and failed miserably. So I had been trying to get it through the library, and it just didn't come up, the book. But I did get the comic book,
yeah.
and I did read through that a little bit,
So yeah.
Why did you say anything about that?
because I don't remember it. But like, I read through it briefly, and then I was like, "This isn't the right book."
Yeah, I
Is it the
didn't-
same story as the book, or does it tell like a slightly different?
I think the wording is a little bit different.
wording is
'cause
different.
In the book club, we compared
Okay.
versions, and some of our just slight words were different. But
I wasn't
it's
sure if it was like
mostly
an
the same.
expansion of the universe.
No, I
or
don't
It's just a comic
think
version
so,
of the
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
good book, good movie.
Good stuff. Fun times.
Yeah.
All right. That is it for today's episode.
You can find us.
Go ahead. Read us out, Tabby.
On Twitter and Instagram at Modern Life Pod, and our website is modernlifepodcast.com. You can email us modernlifepod@gmail.com, and yeah, we usually come out with 2 episodes per month. We're going to be having The Last of Us coming up soon.
Just started playing that Last of Us 2.
So look out for that one. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
I hate to throw anything away. You know the day you do, it'll come back in fashion, be also de la mode. You darling. I have some lovely dresses. Take your pick.
Oh, no, really, I'm fine.
Honey, you're wearing a bathrobe.